The grand concert hall in Vienna sparkled under the crystal chandeliers as the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows. The place had a certain magic to it, the kind that made ordinary people speak in hushed tones as if they'd stepped into a cathedral. Today the hall was buzzing with excitement as people filed in, clutching their programs and whispering to each other about the rare opportunity they were about to witness. This wasn't just any piano performance. Today the legendary Anton Zima was hosting a masterclass. At 62, Anton was considered one of the greatest pianists alive. His recordings of Chopin had brought tears to the eyes of even the most stone-faced critics, and his interpretations of Mozart were said to capture the playfulness the composer himself had intended. Getting a ticket to see Anton perform was difficult enough. Being invited to his masterclass was nearly impossible. The crowd was a mix of serious music students, wealthy patrons of the arts, and dedicated classical music lovers who had traveled from all corners of the world. Men and women in expensive clothes found their seats, some leaning forward in anticipation, others settling in with a confident air that suggested they were regulars at such prestigious events. In the back of the concert hall, away from the excitement, a woman named Nora finished wiping down the last row of seats. At 53, Nora had worked as part of the cleaning staff at this concert hall for 15 years. Her hands, once soft and nimble, now showed the effects of years of hard work, slightly swollen knuckles and skin toughened by countless encounters with cleaning solutions. Her dark hair, streaked with gray, was pulled back in a practical bun, and her uniform, though clean and pressed, had seen better days. "All done back here?" asked Pavel, her supervisor, glancing at his watch. "They're about to start, and we need to stay out of sight once things get going." "Just finishing up," Nora replied, her voice carrying a hint of an accent from her homeland in Eastern Europe. "Go ahead without me. I'll be right there." Pavel nodded and disappeared through the staff door. Nora quickly gathered her cleaning supplies, but as she turned to leave, the opening notes of a piano scale floated through the air. She paused, her body responding to the sound before her mind could catch up. The truth was, Nora had a secret that none of her co-workers knew. During her breaks or after her shifts ended, when the hall was empty and the janitors were busy in other areas, she would sometimes sneak onto the stage. There she would sit at the magnificent grand piano and play, her fingers remembering what her life had forced her to set aside. In those stolen moments, she wasn't Nora, the cleaning lady. She was Nora, who had once studied at a prestigious conservatory back home, whose teachers had spoken of rare talent and promising futures. Before life took unexpected turns, before family obligations and economic hardships had reshaped her path, she had been destined for stages like this one. Now, hearing the warm-up scales, she felt that familiar pull. She glanced at the staff door, then at her watch. Her break wouldn't start for another 30 minutes, but something told her to stay. Just for a moment, just to listen. She slipped into an empty seat in the very back row, placing her cleaning caddy on the floor beside her. If anyone noticed her, they'd probably assume she was taking a short rest before moving on to her next task. It wouldn't be the first time she had paused to listen, though usually she didn't sit down. Today, however, her legs felt tired after a morning of heavy lifting, rearranging furniture for the event. The hall lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the program. A hush fell over the audience as Anton Zima walked onto the stage. Even from her distance, Nora could see his commanding presence. He moved with confidence, nodding graciously at the applause that greeted him. His silver hair caught the stage lights, creating a halo effect that seemed fitting for someone of his stature in the music world. "Good afternoon." His voice carried clearly through the hall, without needing amplification, a skill developed through decades of commanding attention. "Today we will explore the delicate relationship between technical precision and emotional expression. Music without feeling is just noise, but emotion without control is chaos." The audience chuckled appreciatively. Several students shifted nervously in their seats. They had submitted applications months ago, hoping to be selected to play for the master and receive his feedback. Only 6 had been chosen. "Let us begin," Anton said, gesturing to a young man in the front row. "First we will hear Beethoven's Sonata No. 14, commonly known as the Moonlight Sonata." A thin young man approached the piano. He adjusted the bench with practiced precision, placed his hands above the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The familiar, haunting notes of the first movement filled the hall. From her seat, Nora closed her eyes. She knew this piece by heart, had played it countless times herself. The young man's technique was flawless, each note perfectly timed and executed. When he finished, there was enthusiastic applause. Anton nodded approvingly but held up his hand. "Technically perfect," he said, his accent becoming more pronounced as he grew passionate. "But where is the moonlight? Where is the longing? Let me show you." He sat at the piano, and as his fingers touched the keys, the same notes somehow transformed. Where the student's performance had been correct, Anton's was alive. The difference wasn't in the notes. They were exactly the same, but in some indefinable quality that made listeners feel as though they were actually standing in moonlight, experiencing the composer's emotions firsthand. Nora felt a shiver run down her spine. This was why she sneaked in to listen whenever possible. This was the magic that had drawn her to music in the first place, so many years ago. For the next hour, she watched as one student after another performed, each receiving both praise and thoughtful criticism from the master. Anton was firm but kind, showing rather than just telling, guiding the young musicians to dig deeper into both their technique and understanding of the music. During a brief intermission, Nora knew she should return to work. Pavel would be looking for her, but she remained rooted to her seat, feeling that something important was about to happen, though she couldn't have explained why. The second half began with a young woman playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Her performance was emotional, sometimes at the expense of precision, but there was something raw and honest in her approach that clearly moved many in the audience. When she finished, Anton spent several minutes working with her on specific passages, showing her how to maintain that emotional quality, while also respecting the structure of the piece. "Music is balance," he explained, "not just to the student but to everyone present, like life itself. Speaking of balance, let us lighten the mood a bit." He scanned the audience with twinkling eyes. "We've heard from our talented students who have dedicated their lives to music. But I've always believed that music belongs to everyone, not just to those of us fortunate enough to study it formally." The audience murmured in agreement, though a few looked confused about where he was going with this. "Sometimes, the most authentic music comes from unexpected places," Anton continued. "From people who play not for acclaim or career, but simply for the love of it." His eyes swept the back rows, and suddenly, incredibly, they landed on Nora. She froze, hoping he was looking at someone near her, not at her directly. But then he smiled and gestured broadly. "You there in the back row. Yes, you, with the cleaning supplies beside you." The blood drained from Nora's face as hundreds of heads turned to look at her. She wanted to disappear, to explain that she was just taking a short break, that she wasn't part of this world. "Would you join us on stage for a moment?" Anton called out, his tone warm but with an unmistakable hint of mischief. A spotlight found her making escape impossible. Some in the audience were smiling indulgently, assuming this was some planned part of the program. Others looked confused or slightly embarrassed for her. Nora's heart hammered in her chest. She should politely decline, explain that she was staff, not a guest. She should return to her duties. She should do anything except what she was about to do. Yet somehow she found herself standing, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. As if in a dream, she began walking down the aisle toward the stage, feeling the weight of every eye in the hall upon her. What Anton had intended as a light moment, perhaps even a gentle joke, asking a cleaning lady to join a masterclass of elite musicians, was about to take an unexpected turn. Neither he nor anyone else in that grand hall could have guessed the truth about the woman in the worn uniform making her way slowly toward the gleaming piano. The walk from the back of the concert hall to the stage felt like the longest journey of Nora's life. Each step echoed in her ears, mixing with the hushed whispers that rippled through the audience. She could feel hundreds of eyes following her, some curious, some amused, some embarrassed on her behalf. Her cheeks burned and she kept her gaze fixed on the polished wooden floor. "What am I doing?" she thought, her mind racing. "I should turn around. I should explain there's been a misunderstanding." But something pushed her forward, perhaps the same something that had kept her fingers dancing across piano keys during stolen moments all these years. Perhaps it was the ghost of her younger self, the girl with dreams who wouldn't recognize the woman she had become. As she approached the steps leading up to the stage, Anton Zima extended his hand. His smile was kind, though his eyes held a hint of mischief. He clearly thought he was creating a light-hearted moment, a break from the seriousness of the masterclass. "Come, come," he encouraged when she hesitated at the bottom step. "There's nothing to fear." A few chuckles drifted from the audience. Someone whispered, "Is this part of the program?" Another voice replied, "Must be. Some kind of demonstration." Nora took a deep breath and placed her hand in Anton's. His fingers were long and elegant, a pianist's hands, unmarked by years of scrubbing and cleaning. Her own felt rough and unworthy by comparison, but his grip was firm and reassuring as he guided her onto the stage. Standing under the bright lights, Nora felt dizzy. The grand piano gleamed before her, its lid propped open like a massive black wing. It was far nicer than the upright she had learned on as a child, nicer even than the one at the conservatory where she had studied briefly before life had intervened. "What is your name?" Anton asked, his microphone carrying his voice throughout the hall. "Nora," she answered softly. "Louder, please. Let us all hear you." "Nora," she repeated, her voice stronger this time. "Nora," Anton echoed, smiling at the audience. "Nora works here at our beautiful concert hall, keeping it spotless for all of us to enjoy. Today she was taking a little break to listen to our masterclass, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to hear from someone who experiences music from a different perspective?" He turned to her, his expression gentle but with that same hint of playfulness. "Do you like music, Nora?" "Yes," she said simply. "Do you play any instrument yourself? Perhaps a little piano at home?" The question hung in the air. This was her chance to smile politely, say no, and return to her seat. Instead, she heard herself say, "I used to play." Anton's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't quite the answer he'd expected. "You played piano?" he asked, sounding genuinely curious now. She nodded. "Wonderful. Then perhaps you would humor us by playing something? Anything you remember, even if it's just a simple tune or exercise." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps thinking this had gone too far, that it was cruel to put a cleaning lady on the spot like this. Others leaned forward, curious to see what would happen next. Nora looked at the magnificent instrument before her. It had been played today by some of the most promising young pianists in Europe and by the master himself. What right did she have to touch it with her work-worn hands? "It's been many years," she said. "All the more impressive if you can still play then," Anton replied. He gestured toward the piano bench. "Please, just a little something. Then I promise to let you return to your break." The audience waited. Nora could walk away now, thank him for the invitation, and disappear back to the world she belonged in. No one would blame her. But the piano called to her, as it always had, as it always would. Slowly, she sat down on the bench. It felt both foreign and achingly familiar. She adjusted the height, a movement so automatic that she didn't even think about it. A few knowing glances were exchanged among the musicians in the audience. That small adjustment was something only someone with training would do. Nora placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. She closed her eyes for a moment, shutting out the watchful crowd, the magnificent hall, even Anton standing just a few feet away. What should she play? Her mind raced through possibilities. A simple exercise would be safest. Scales, perhaps, or an easy piece for beginners. That's what everyone expected, a halting, basic tune that would satisfy Anton's curiosity and allow this uncomfortable moment to end. Instead, her fingers found the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Finine No. 2, the first notes hung in the air like drops of water, pure, clear, perfect. There was a collective intake of breath from the audience, but Nora didn't hear it. She was already lost in the music, her hands remembering what her mind had tried to forget. The melody unfolded, gentle yet passionate, flowing like a stream that had been dammed for years and suddenly set free. Her left hand provided the steady foundation, while her right wove the intricate, emotional melody that had captured hearts for nearly 2 centuries. Anton's expression transformed from mild amusement to shock, then to wonder. He took a few steps back, not wanting to distract her, his eyes fixed on her hands as they moved across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. In the audience, the initial uncomfortable shuffling had given way to stunned silence. The young musicians who had performed earlier exchanged startled glances. Even those who knew little about classical music could tell this was no beginner's attempt. This was someone who understood what they were doing, who knew the music in their bones. Nora's technique wasn't flawless. There were occasional hesitations, small mistakes that revealed the years away from serious practice. But there was something else in her playing, something that technical perfection couldn't capture: raw emotion. The piece spoke of nostalgia, of love remembered, of beauty glimpsed and then lost. And for Nora, it carried the weight of her own journey. The dreams set aside, the paths not taken, the music silenced, but never forgotten. As she reached the middle section, her confidence grew. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. Her face relaxed into an expression of pure concentration. For these moments, she wasn't a cleaning lady playing dress-up in someone else's world. She was exactly where she belonged. The piece built toward its climax, her fingers dancing faster, the emotional intensity growing. Then gradually it returned to the gentler theme, like a conversation winding down, saying all that needed to be said. The final notes lingered in the perfect acoustics of the hall, then faded to silence. For 3 heartbeats. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the applause erupted, spontaneous, genuine, thunderous. People rose to their feet, their faces showing a mixture of amazement and delight. Some were smiling, some were wiping away tears. Nora opened her eyes, almost surprised to find herself on stage. The reality of what she had just done crashed over her. She had played, really played, in front of Anton Zima and hundreds of others. Her hands trembled as she placed them in her lap. Anton approached slowly, his expression unreadable. He stopped beside the piano, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. "Who are you?" he asked quietly, though his microphone still carried the words to the audience. The applause died down as people strained to hear her answer. "Just Nora," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I clean the concert hall." Anton shook his head. "No, that may be what you do, but it is not who you are." He turned to the audience, his voice ringing with conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something extraordinary." He faced Nora again, extending his hand to help her stand. She rose shakily, overwhelmed by the continuing applause. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. The spotlight still shone on her, making her uniform look out of place against the gleaming piano. But something had shifted, in the room, in Anton's eyes, and in Nora herself. She stood a little straighter, her voice a little steadier, as she prepared to answer his question and reveal the truth she had kept hidden for so many years. The applause gradually faded as the audience settled back into their seats, eager to hear Nora's answer. Even those who had been checking their watches, thinking about their dinner plans or evening commitments, were now fully present in the moment, caught up in the unexpected drama unfolding before them. Anton guided Nora to a chair that had been quickly brought onto the stage. She sat down, feeling strangely calm now that the initial shock had passed. The worst, or perhaps the best, had already happened. She had played in front of all these people. She had revealed her secret self. What came next couldn't possibly be more frightening than that leap had been. "Please," Anton said, sitting on the piano bench across from her. "Tell us your story." Nora looked out at the sea of faces. They were no longer looking at her with amusement or pity, but with genuine curiosity and respect. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her that way. "I grew up in a small town near Krakow," she began, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "My father was a carpenter, my mother a seamstress. We didn't have much, but there was an old upright piano that had belonged to my grandmother." She smiled at the memory. "No one in the family played it anymore. It was just a piece of furniture where my mother placed family photos. But I was drawn to it from the time I could barely reach the keys. I would press them one by one, fascinated by how each made a different sound." Anton nodded encouragingly. "And did you have lessons?" "Not at first," Nora replied. "I taught myself simple tunes I heard on the radio. When I was 8, my teacher at school noticed I had some talent. She spoke to my parents, and they scraped together enough money for lessons with an elderly woman in our town who had once been quite accomplished." As she spoke, Nora's accent became more pronounced, the words carrying her back to another time, another life. "Madame Borowski," she continued, a hint of fondness in her voice. She was strict but kind. "She said I had a gift, that I played with feeling few children possessed. For 5 years I studied with her, We couldn't afford many books, so she would write out exercises and pieces for me by hand. And then, Anton prompted when she paused. Then she died, Nora said simply. But by then I had won a small competition. The prize included a recommendation to the conservatory in Warsaw. My parents were uncertain. No one in our family had ever pursued music professionally, but Madame had told them it would be a sin to waste my talent. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. This was not what they had expected when they purchased tickets to a masterclass with the great Anton Zima, but many would later say it was far better than anything they could have anticipated. I was accepted to the conservatory at 16, Nora continued. It was overwhelming. The city, the other students, many from wealthy families who had played on fine instruments their whole lives. My technique needed work, but my professors said I had something that couldn't be taught, a natural expressiveness, an ability to find the heart of a piece. Her eyes grew distant. Those were beautiful years. Difficult but beautiful. I practiced 8, sometimes 10 hours a day. I lived for music. And yet, Anton said gently, you are now cleaning concert halls instead of playing in them. A shadow crossed Nora's face. Life doesn't always follow the path we imagine for ourselves. She took a deep breath as if deciding how much to share in this most public of settings. In my final year at the conservatory, my father became very ill. Cancer. My mother needed help caring for him and keeping their small business running. I was the oldest child, so I returned home thinking it would be temporary. Several people in the audience nodded in understanding. How many dreams had been set aside for family obligations, for the practical demands of life? He fought for 3 years, Nora continued. By the time he passed, my younger sister had her own family to care for, and my mother's health was failing from the stress of it all. The business had debts. The economy in our region was collapsing. She shrugged slightly, a gesture that spoke volumes about acceptance and resignation. I found work where I could. Eventually, I met my husband, Tomasz. He was offered a job in Vienna, and we moved here 15 years ago, hoping for a better life. And the piano? Anton asked. Did you stop playing entirely? A small smile touched Nora's lips. I couldn't afford a piano of my own. But when I began working here at the concert hall, I discovered something wonderful. During quiet times between performances, when the hall was empty, you played, Anton finished for her. Understanding dawning on his face. Yes, Nora admitted. I shouldn't have. It was against the rules. But the temptation was too great. All these beautiful instruments sitting silent. I would clean the stage area last, then give myself 10 or 15 minutes, just enough to keep the music alive inside me. A woman in the third row wiped away a tear. An older gentleman nodded in recognition of something deeply human in Nora's confession. For 15 years, she continued, I've been playing in empty halls. Sometimes I imagined an audience, but I never dreamed I would actually play for one again, especially not like this. She gestured to the grand hall around them, a self-deprecating smile on her face. Anton was quiet for a moment, processing her story. Then he turned to her with a seriousness that hadn't been present before. May I ask why you chose that particular nocturne today? Nora's expression softened. It was the last piece I performed at the conservatory before leaving. It felt right somehow, as if I needed to pick up where I had left off. Anton nodded thoughtfully. He turned to address the audience. What we have witnessed today is something quite remarkable. Talent hidden in plain sight, passion that refuses to die, even when circumstances try to extinguish it. He faced Nora again. Would you play something else for us? Your choice this time. No pressure, no surprises. She hesitated only briefly before nodding. I would like that very much. As she returned to the piano bench, adjusting it once more with the automatic movements of a trained pianist, the audience held its collective breath. What would this mysterious woman, this cleaner with the soul of an artist, choose to play now that she was performing willingly, not from shock or obligation? Nora placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune. The dreamy, impressionistic piece filled the hall with its gentle beauty. She played it differently than the Chopin, more confidently now, but also more tenderly, as if telling a story close to her heart. In the front row, several of the young pianists who had performed earlier watched her hands with newfound respect. Yes, there were small technical imperfections, the result of years without proper practice facilities or instruction. But there was also something many of them were still struggling to achieve: a deep, personal connection to the music that made it come alive. As the piece approached its conclusion, rising toward the delicate high notes that seemed to evaporate into thin air, Nora closed her eyes. For this moment, all the years of regret and wondering what if fell away. She was simply a musician making music, which was all she had ever truly wanted to be. The final notes shimmered in the perfect acoustics of the hall, then faded to silence. This time Nora opened her eyes immediately, a soft smile on her face as she acknowledged the applause that erupted once more. Anton approached the piano, clapping along with the audience. When the applause died down, he spoke into his microphone, his voice carrying a new note of excitement and purpose. "Nora, I have a proposition for you," he said, his eyes twinkling with an idea that had clearly just formed. "But first I must speak with the director of the hall." He turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a brief intermission. Please return in 15 minutes for what I promise will be a most interesting conclusion to our masterclass today." As he helped Nora up from the piano bench, he whispered something in her ear that made her eyes widen in surprise. The audience buzzed with speculation as the two walked off stage together. The world-famous pianist and the cleaning lady whose hidden talent had just turned an ordinary afternoon into something none of them would ever forget. The buzz in the concert hall grew louder as the 15-minute intermission stretched toward 20 minutes. People checked their watches, glanced at the empty stage, and whispered theories about what might be happening backstage. No one left their seats, though they could have used the extra time to stretch their legs or visit the restrooms. The afternoon had taken such an unexpected turn that nobody wanted to miss whatever came next. "I heard she was a child prodigy in Poland," one woman said to her companion. "My cousin works here," another audience member claimed. "Says she's heard someone playing late at night when the hall should be empty. Must have been her all along." Rumors and speculation flew back and forth, growing more elaborate with each retelling. The young pianists who had performed in the masterclass huddled together near the front, their own performances now overshadowed by the cleaning lady who had stunned them all. Finally, the stage door opened. The hall's director, Mr. Hoffman, stepped out first. He was a short, balding man in his 60s who usually stayed behind the scenes, handling the business aspects of running the prestigious venue. Today, however, his face shone with excitement as he approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for your patience. This has been quite an extraordinary afternoon, hasn't it?" He paused for the murmur of agreement that swept through the crowd. "I've just had a most unusual conversation with Maestro Zima, and, well, I'll let him explain." He gestured toward the side of the stage where Anton was now emerging, followed by a hesitant Nora. The audience applauded as Anton took his place at the microphone. Nora stood slightly behind him, looking both overwhelmed and excited. She had changed out of her cleaning uniform into a simple black dress that someone had found for her backstage, perhaps belonging to one of the soloists who regularly performed at the hall. The transformation was striking. Without the uniform to mark her role, she looked like she might belong on the stage after all. "Thank you all for your patience," Anton began. "I know this masterclass has taken an unexpected direction, but I believe the most valuable lessons often come from the most unexpected sources." He turned slightly, including Nora in his gaze. "Today we have been reminded of something essential about music, that true talent doesn't always follow conventional paths." He paused, looking out at the audience with the commanding presence that had made him famous not just as a pianist, but as a teacher and advocate for the arts. During our break, I had a conversation with Mr. Hoffman about Nora's unique situation. I am pleased to announce that starting next month, Nora will be joining the staff of this concert hall in a very different capacity. A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. Nora's eyes widened slightly as if then she wasn't entirely sure what was coming next. The hall's community outreach program has been seeking someone to lead their new initiative, bringing music education to neighborhoods where children have little access to the arts. The position requires not just musical knowledge, but the ability to connect with people from all backgrounds, to inspire those who might not see themselves as belonging in places like this. He gestured around the opulent hall. "Who better?" Anton continued. his voice warm with conviction, than someone who has kept the flame of music burning despite every obstacle life placed in her way? Someone who understands that music belongs not just to those of us fortunate enough to study at conservatories, but to anyone with the passion to pursue it. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. Nora's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But Anton held up his hand to quiet the applause. Before Nora begins her new role, I have one more request. He turned to her fully now. The young pianist here today came to learn from me, but I believe they, and all of us, have as much to learn from you. Would you join me in a duet? Something we can arrange quickly. Perhaps the Schubert Fantasy in F minor. It's written for 4 hands. Nora looked stunned. You want to play it with me? The audience held its collective breath. Anton Zima, whose recording sold millions, who performed in the world's most prestigious venues, was inviting a cleaning lady, talented though she clearly was, to play alongside him. I would be honored, Anton said, and he meant it. There was no hint of condescension in his voice, only genuine respect. Slowly, Nora nodded. I know the piece, she said. Not perfectly, but perfect is not what music is about, Anton interrupted gently. As I was trying to explain to our students earlier today, perfect technique without heart is just noise. You have demonstrated that the reverse is also true. Heart can overcome technical imperfections and still create something beautiful. Together, they moved to the piano. Anton took the lower part, Nora the higher. There was a moment of awkwardness as they adjusted the single bench to accommodate both of them, their shoulders almost touching. Then Anton nodded. They raised their hands in perfect synchronization and began to play. The Schubert Fantasy started softly, almost tentatively, the melody flowing between the two pianists like a conversation. As they played, something magical happened. Nora's initial nervousness fell away. Her timing aligned perfectly with Anton's, her phrasing complementing his as if they had rehearsed for weeks instead of deciding to play together on a whim. For his part, Anton found himself adjusting to her style, finding a middle ground between his polished precision and her raw expressiveness. The result was something neither would have created alone, a performance that had both technical brilliance and emotional depth. In the audience, many closed their eyes, simply letting the music wash over them. Others watched, fascinated by the unlikely pair at the piano, the world-famous maestro and the woman who, until today, had only played when no one was listening. As the piece built toward its climax, Nora's confidence grew visibly. Her back straightened, her movements became more fluid, her whole being seemed to expand as she reclaimed a part of herself that had been hidden for too long. When the final chords rang out, powerful and resolute, the audience erupted into a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old building. Anton and Nora stood, bowing together. He took her hand and raised it high, a gesture that said clearly, "We are equals here." The applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. People stamped their feet, called out "Bravo!" and "Encore," some wiping away tears. When the noise finally began to subside, Anton spoke once more into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have all witnessed something important today. A reminder that music, true music, comes not from perfect technique or prestigious training, but from the human heart. From passion that refuses to die, even when life takes us on unexpected paths. He turned to the young pianists in the front row. This is your most important lesson today. Practice your scales, perfect your technique, learn your theory, but remember, Nora, remember that without heart, without that indefinable something that connects your soul to the music, all the technique in the world means nothing. The students nodded, some looking thoughtful, others visibly moved. They had come to learn from a master technician but had received a different kind of masterclass entirely. Anton turned back to Nora, his voice softer, but still caught by the microphone. And you will make an excellent teacher, not because you can play Chopin perfectly, but because you understand what music really means, what it can do for the human spirit. Nora's smile was radiant, years of hidden sadness falling away as new possibilities opened before her. Thank you, she whispered, the simple words carrying a world of meaning. The director came forward again, beaming like a man who had just discovered a treasure in his own backyard. We will be announcing details of our expanded community program soon, he told the audience, including several special performances. As he continued speaking about logistics and future events, a young woman in the back row quietly raised her phone and snapped a photo of Nora and Anton standing side by side at the piano. By morning, that image would be circulating on social media, along with a shaky video of Nora's performance. Within days, her story would reach far beyond the walls of the Vienna concert hall, touching people who had never set foot inside such a venue, inspiring others who had set their own dreams aside. But for now, in this moment, Nora stood in the spotlight that had always been meant for her, surrounded by the music that had never truly left her soul, finally visible to a world that had overlooked her for far too long. 3 months had passed since that extraordinary afternoon at the Vienna concert hall. The early summer heat pressed down on the city, but inside the community center in one of Vienna's working-class neighborhoods, the temperature was pleasantly cool. 20 children, ranging in age from 7 to 14, sat in a semicircle, their attention fixed on the woman seated at an upright piano. "Music speaks when words fail," Nora told them, her fingers lightly touching the keys without pressing them down. "Today we're going to learn how a simple melody can tell a story without using a single word." A small girl in the front row raised her hand. "But how does it do that? How do notes tell a story?" Nora smiled. It was exactly the question she'd been hoping for. "That's what we're going to explore. Listen to this." She played a simple, cheerful tune in a major key, the notes dancing like sunlight on water. The children's faces brightened in response. "What does that make you think of?" she asked. "A happy day. Someone playing. My birthday." The answers came quickly, overlapping in their enthusiasm. Nora nodded encouragingly. "Now listen to this." Her hands shifted, playing the same basic melody but in a minor key, slowing the tempo, adding weight to certain notes. The mood in the room immediately changed, the children growing quiet as the melancholy music washed over them. "And this?" she asked softly when she finished. "It's sad," a boy near the back said. "Like someone lost something important." "Exactly," Nora said. "The notes themselves tell us how to feel, how to understand the story. That's the magic of music. It crosses all barriers of language, age, background. It speaks directly to something inside us." She stood up from the piano, looking around at the eager faces. Many of these children had never had access to music education before. Some came from immigrant families where money was tight and extras like piano lessons were an impossible luxury. Others had parents working multiple jobs, leaving little time for cultural enrichment. But all of them were here now, part of the expanded community program that had grown dramatically since Nora had joined the staff. "Let's try something," she said, moving to a table where simple percussion instruments were laid out. "We're going to create our own musical story together." As the children eagerly picked up tambourines, triangles, and small drums, a knock sounded at the door. The program assistant, Louisa, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Nora, but you have visitors." "They say they're from the Ministry of Culture?" Nora's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Can you start them on the rhythm exercise we practiced yesterday? I'll be back in a few minutes." Louisa nodded, taking Nora's place at the front of the room. As Nora stepped into the hallway, she saw 2 official-looking people waiting, a tall woman in a crisp suit, and an older man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ms. Novak?" the woman asked, extending her hand. "I'm Katerina Reiter from the Ministry of Culture, and this is Dr. Werner Gruber, who chairs our Committee on Music Education Initiatives." Nora shook their hands, a slight nervousness fluttering in her stomach. "How can I help you?" Dr. Gruber smiled warmly. "We've been hearing remarkable things about your work here. The video of your performance with Anton Zima has over 2 million views now. Did you know that?" Nora shook her head, still amazed by how quickly her story had spread. The morning after the masterclass, she had awakened to find her phone buzzing constantly with messages from old friends and former classmates who had recognized her in the video. Within a week, a local news station had done a feature on her. By the end of the month, her story had been picked up by international media, shared across social media platforms, and even mentioned on a popular talk show in America. "The reason we're here," Katerina continued, "is that your story has resonated with so many people. It's created momentum around the issue of accessible music education that we'd like to build upon. We're launching a new national initiative," Dr. Gruber explained, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. 10 new community music centers across Austria, specifically in underserved areas. We'd like you to help design the teaching approach and train the instructors. Nora felt her breath catch. Me? But I don't have formal qualifications for something like that. Katerina's expression softened. What you have is something more valuable. The lived experience of keeping music alive against all odds, and the proven ability to connect with students who don't see themselves as belonging in traditional music education settings. And your story is powerful precisely because you didn't follow the traditional path, Dr. Gruber added. And yet here you are, changing lives through music. From the classroom behind them, the sound of children's laughter and surprisingly coordinated rhythm drifted out, as if underscoring his point. Could I think about it? Nora asked. Of course, Katerina replied, handing her a business card. We're hosting a planning meeting next Thursday. Even if you haven't decided, we'd love for you to attend and share your perspective. After they left, Nora leaned against the wall, taking a moment to absorb what had just happened. 3 months ago, she had been pushing a cleaning cart through these same hallways. Now she was being asked to help shape music education policy at a national level. She returned to her classroom, where Louisa had the children creating an increasingly complex rhythm pattern, their faces serious with concentration. Nora watched from the doorway, her heart full. Whatever she decided about the ministry's offer, this was what mattered most, opening doors to the world of music for children who might otherwise never have the chance to walk through them. That evening, Nora climbed the steps to her apartment, her bag heavy with sheet music and student notebooks. The building was old but well-maintained, located in a neighborhood that balanced affordability with comfort. It wasn't the luxury high-rise where many of the concert hall's star performers stayed when in Vienna, but it was a significant upgrade from the small flat she had shared with Tomasz before everything changed. I'm home, she called as she entered. Tomasz appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. In his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around his eyes, he had been Nora's steadfast support through all the changes of recent months. How were the lessons today? He asked, taking her heavy bag. Wonderful. The children are making such progress. She kicked off her shoes with a sigh of relief. And something unexpected happened. The Ministry of Culture came to visit. His eyebrows shot up as she explained their proposal. When she finished, he was beaming with pride. Will you do it? He asked. I don't know yet. It's so much responsibility, but also such an opportunity to make a difference. Tomasz squeezed her hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Nora smiled gratefully. Her husband had adjusted to their new circumstances with remarkable grace. His own job as a mechanic remained the same, but he had embraced Nora's transformed career without a hint of jealousy or resentment. If anything, he seemed to enjoy seeing her reclaim a part of herself that had been dormant for so long. Anton called, he added. He'll be in Vienna next week and wants to know if you're free for dinner on Wednesday. He mentioned something about a benefit concert. Nora nodded, making a mental note. Since their unexpected duet, she and Anton had developed an unlikely friendship. He had become both a mentor and a collaborator, helping her navigate her sudden visibility in the music world, while treating her as a respected peer rather than a novelty. Later that evening, after dinner had been cleared away, Nora sat at the piano that now occupied one corner of their living room. It wasn't the grand concert instrument she played at work, but a quality upright that Anton had helped her select. Her fingers moved through familiar exercises, then into a piece she was working on, Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, which she had always loved but never fully mastered. As she played, she reflected on the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. There were still moments when it all felt unreal, when she expected to wake up and find herself back in her old life. But then she would remember that afternoon when everything changed, not just because she had been discovered, but because she had finally allowed herself to be seen. The doorbell rang, interrupting her practice. Tomasz answered it, returning a moment later with a small package. It's from that music school in Salzburg, he said, handing it to her. Nora opened it to find a handwritten letter and a small silver pin in the shape of a piano key. Dear Ms. Novak, the letter began. After your inspiring talk last month, our students wanted to make you an honorary member of our school. Your story has shown them that it's never too late to pursue one's passion, and that true music comes from the heart, not just from years of training. Tears blurred her vision before she could finish reading. Setting the letter aside, she picked up the small silver pin, turning it over in her fingers. So many lives touched, so many connections made, all because Anton Zima had decided to call on a cleaning lady as a joke during a masterclass. She pinned the small token to her shirt and returned to the piano. Tomorrow would bring new classes, new decisions, new challenges. But tonight she would simply play. Not for an audience, not for validation, but for the pure joy of letting music speak through her, as it had always been meant to do.